Hello everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore. Welcome to the MuseScore Café. So, for those of you who are new here, welcome. I do some version of this every week where I pick some topic to talk about and show you different things about using MuseScore. And this week, being the first Wednesday of the month, is the special Ask Me Anything session. So I don't have a topic other than answering your questions. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. And I see questions already arriving, which is great. And this series is brought to you by the Mastering MuseScore School, where I offer my online courses for learning MuseScore and learning music. And before I get deep into anything, I definitely want to make sure everyone watching knows about. Actually, I also wanted to make sure I had sound on my music, but I do. Okay, good. I want to make sure that everyone knows about my my workshop tomorrow. And if most of you are on my mailing list and have seen that, or you've seen posts about it wherever else, but for anyone who's not already on board with that, tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and whatever that translates to you locally. Oh yeah, and Michael, if you're still wanting help with that thing with the frames, I'm all over it. Okay, so what I want to do is post the information about my workshop tomorrow here in the chat, and I'm going to pin this to the top rather than my usual pinning of the school link, because this is something I think a lot of people will be interested in, and you'll find useful. So I do want to just talk about this for a moment. So what this is a workshop I'm doing entitled How to Create a Great Chord Progression. And one of the things we'll talk about is, well, what do I mean by that? What is a great chord progression anyhow? And it's subjective, but we'll talk about the things that go into creating chord progressions, basically. And it's free. It's the workshop itself is free. It's an hour long tomorrow afternoon if you're anywhere in the United States. Elsewhere it's evening or early morning. So the workshop's free. It is in conjunction with my teachable courses, and my harmony and chord progressions course is definitely where you will go to get more information on the stuff that I'm going to talk about. But my goal is in an hour to really give you a good feel for things. I can't tell you everything about creating chord progressions, but I can get you something useful. So Dallin, if you have a long description, feel free to be posting it in here, but also if it, you posting into the conversation space on the community is a great place to be able to post things, especially if I need to see your actual score. So all that talk aside, I'm going to go back and look in with Sora's question first, which is about orchestral scores and creating a text that shows up basically at the top of the score, maybe somewhere else, and then also shows up in all the parts. So first of all, you will notice that's already the case with the tempo marking here, right? The tempo marking does that automatically. It's there at the top of the score, but if you look at all the parts, it's there, right? So tempo markings, that happens automatically for. The other things that it happens automatically for are the things you expect it to. For instance, rehearsal marks. Do I have a rehearsal mark in here? No, it's too short. But if I use a rehearsal mark, Control M and enter a letter A, letter B, etc., those will show up at the top of the score and all parts. But the other things that show up is what we call system text. So, there's also voltas. There's a number of things that MuseScore knows to always put at the top of the score and all parts. But if you have your own text, like I'm using the word vamp here, you add it as system text. So if you go to the text palette, it's system text over here. Or the shortcut to add system text is Control Shift T or Control Alt T. It is Control Shift T, yay. So system text. So Control Shift T added system text. You can also go to add text, system text. There. So system text shows up at the top of the score, and then again, it's going to be in all the parts. There's my vamp and system text, right? So that happens automatically. Now, what happens if you want it to be repeated lower? Like, okay, this isn't an orchestral score, but it'll do, right? What if you wanted the rehearsal mark or tempo or whatever to also be repeated above the strings? That's pretty common. Well, the thing you'll do, so in my case, I'll repeat it above the rhythm section. So what I'm going to do is add it as staff text here. So I'll just use regular old Control T and say, I'll say it's system text, even though it's not. This particular template that I'm using puts staff text below the staff. That's because in jazz charts, we tend to put more text below the staff to avoid conflicting with chord symbols. So in the jazz templates, staff text goes below the staff, system text goes above. That's just the way I set it up. But I can just press X and flip it above. So now I can see my text above both staves. Now the only problem is when I go to the guitar part, I'm going to actually see that text twice, right? I see the actual system text, and then I see the staff text that I added. And yes, I flipped it above in the score, but it's not flipped above in the part. That's because that kind of fine-tuning of positioning is often different between score and parts. So in any case, I don't want to see it twice. I'm just going to make that one invisible. So V. So that's basically your answer. System text gets it at the top of the score in all parts. If you want to repeat it on any other staves, what you would do is just add staff text there and then make it invisible in the actual part. This is something we would love to be able to improve, and it's kind of being thought about for MuseScore 4. I kind of don't think it's going to happen immediately when MuseScore 4 comes out, but in the not distant future, I do expect it to be the case that you can add, that you can select which staves you want system text to appear on, or it might automatically figure it out based on bracketing. We're not entirely sure how that's going to work, but there will be something. So hopefully that answers that question pretty completely there. So then I also saw Michael talking about, you said me, but now I don't actually see your question. So I'm going to assume that you are talking about the frame thing. So let me open your score. So Fretless Spaceman has posted also to Facebook and the support forums issues with trying to get text to show up in different places in a score. So now I got to remember which one of these is yours. Is it this guy? Let's see. Yes, that's the one. Yay. All right. Yes. And let me turn off my notifications so they don't become annoying. Notifications. Bye. Okay. So this is a score that he's created in which he's saying he wants text at the bottom. And if you have another question, by all means ask that also. But this is how to add breaks to staves. Yeah. So this is the thing. You've got alternating a text frame music, and it's throughout your entire score, you're alternating text frame music. And what I believe you were asking about is was trying to have text at the bottom of one page and then also more text at the top of the next. So right now you don't have adjacent text frames. You would have to have two text frames, one at the bottom of a page, one at the top of the next. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to add let's say that you wanted this text to be at the bottom of page 1, and then you wanted another text frame at the top of page 2. So I'm going to go ahead and add that text frame, and I've got a shortcut defined for it because I add a lot of frames, because I do a lot of educational things too, obviously. But I will go to the frames and measures palette down here and add myself a text frame. and then say, this needs to be on next page. So I now have 2 frames, 1 frame, 2 frames. And now what I need to do is, if I want, first of all, there's a big gap here I don't need, so I'm going to want to reduce that gap. And the tricky thing here, and so the way I'm going to reduce that gap is using the inspector. But what you're going to discover, it's a little tricky to select that frame. If I just click the text, it's actually has the text selected, not the frame, because normally you're working on the text, not the frame itself. So if I want to select the frame, there's a couple ways to do it. Control click, or on a Mac, I assume it's command click. Control click will select something and then like add things to selections. And if you've already selected something, control clicking removes it. It does another thing too. It selects things underneath things. So right now, if I just click the text, it selects the text. If I now control click it, now the frame is selected. It is selected what's underneath the text, which is the frame. Now that the frame is selected, I can go ahead and reduce that bottom gap there. Actually, I don't know that that's really going to end up being important, but I'm going to do it anyhow just to point out that it's doable. So now that that frame is selected, now I can add the break to it. So I can use the spacer. I use the palette. I'll just hit the page break there. So frame is selected. I can tell the frame is selected because the inspector tells me the frame is selected. And now I just hit the page break. And when I hit the page break, you see it is now at the bottom of the page. And my this needs to be on next page is indeed on the next page. So that's basically it. The tricky part is making sure you've selected the frame and not the text. So I did it with control click. Another thing is just to click very carefully on the border. Clicking the border, if you can manage it, will usually, but not always, it's really tricky to do it that way. So selecting just the frame is tricky, I will say that. But another way to do it is to take advantage of the keyboard shortcuts. Like if I select what's right before the frame, this double bar line, and now hit Alt plus right, it selects the frame. So you can see it says text frame. So I selected the last thing on the previous system and then Alt-Right, and that selects the frame. Alt-Right moves kind of one element at a time. So anyhow, once you've selected that frame, I just added the page break from the palette, but you can also use Control-Enter. So Control-Enter just deleted that frame, and then Control-Enter again adds it back. So let me make my page smaller so you can see this a little better. Alt-Right with the frame selected, Control-Enter, Control-Enter. It's toggling the thing. So your score does not have 2 adjacent frames. So that's why it didn't work. You need to have 2 adjacent frames to do that on. So if you're still having trouble, attach the actual score and tell us which specific frame you are trying to put a break on. But I promise it works. All you have to do is make sure you've selected the frame itself and not the text. And again, the easiest way, select the last thing on the previous system and then Alt-Right. Now that this frame is selected, the perfectly functional is selected, Control-Enter now puts the break right there. The break is on that frame. So I used Control-Enter, but again, you can use the palette. If you've selected the frame is still selected. I can now click the palette to add and remove the frame. It toggles itself. So the trick is make sure the frame itself is selected. Cannot emphasize that enough, but also make sure that you actually have a frame you want at the bottom of the page. So that wasn't the case here. You didn't have a frame that made sense to have at the bottom of the page. So there's probably a different version of this score that does that. So now I'm going to come back to Dallin, who has a long question here that's, I'll see, he's got a 4-part piece. So definitely, Dallin, I would love it if you would actually go to the community and attach and post your score to the conversation space. Then I can really easily get at it. It's going to make this, in general, if you've got a complicated question like this, that's going to make life so much easier. But I'm going to try to sort this out. So he says 4-part vocal barbershop. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to create a new score. And I'll use choral barbershop. And now I have this. So he's got that set up. Now he's using file parts. Now, first of all, that's not super common, right? In barbershop music, you wouldn't normally have everyone's parts individually, or would you? I guess I don't know the barbershop world specifically well enough. Choral music in general, people work from the score. But it is possible to do parts from the separate voices here. So let's keep going. I'm going to keep reading your question before I just follow along. So yeah, you're generating the parts using the single part and making sure each one is the voice. When he plays each part back, he can't completely separate the two. All right, so that's interesting. Let's find out. Let's just find out what happens. Barbershop template does some things interesting as far as how it sets up the channels for this. So you might have to do some fiddling around, but we'll see. So I'm going to go to File, Parts, and so for anyone who hasn't seen how to generate parts, File Parts is normally you just hit all parts and it gives you a part for each staff. But what's going on here is you're wanting separate parts for each voice, right? So you're saying you want a single part and then just the tenor is the tenor part, and it's going to be the top staff, and you'll add that. I forget how to do this, to be honest. Hit the plus, yes. And then come over here and say only voice 1, right? Only voice 1. And then I'm going to add another part called lead. And it's going to have that same staff, but this time only voice 2. And not that I think it's relevant, but I'll go ahead and create my baritone and make it only be voice 1. Let's make this dialogue a little wider, shall we? Making this only voice 1, and then a final part. So this is what, if you post your score ahead of time, it kind of saves me the trouble of doing all this. So bass, and then do this, and then come over here. But you know, it's nice that people get to see how this happens. So now I've got my 4 parts. Great. And now I'll add some notes. I'll add some tenor notes here. And then I'll come back and add lead notes. Whoops. Voice 2. And it'll be half notes. And then I'll go down and add my bari part. And then my bass part. All right. So if I play this now, I hear all 4 parts. Now, did you do the thing where you added the special texts, Dallin? Is one question. Okay, so I'm not totally positive if you've got the special magic texts. So first, I'm just going to go with this right now. So right now, when I do this, I hear that. I'm now going to go look at the tenor part and see what happens when I play it. So what I'm hearing is both parts, right? And I think that has to do with the very special way that the barbershop template sets this up. So let's find our way through it. So far we're on the right page. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and save this one because I feel like I might want to refer to this later. So this is barbershop voices parts. Okay, so the trick is, how am I going to get the tenor to only play voice 1? And there's probably a couple ways of doing it, and we'll find out. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the mixer. Now, one thing I know about the mixer is that oops, not the play panel, the mixer. F10 is mixer. Hello, F10. Oh, it's over here. I have to. I haven't detached it on this computer. I am on my new computer that I debuted last week, I believe. So, and I don't think I had actually used the mixer yet, so it hadn't detached. And all right, fine. Um, I want to resize this thing, but I'm having trouble gripping. There we go. For some reason, I can't really grip the bottom very easily on this trackpad here. Okay, so what's going on is this staff has two sub channels here because it's got one channel for the tenor and one channel for the lead. That's how the barbershop template is set up. So it's got two sub channels here. I might use that, or I might use the voices here. So the first thing I'm going to try is just muting voice 2. See if that works. I got to click back in the score. Hello. Well, that's weird. Not only do I have to click in the score, but apparently I got to actually do something else too. Come on. Let me close the mixer then. That was interesting. So there you go, Dallin. Just muting voice 2 does the trick. Just so you know, I'm in my special workspace here. I should go back to my cafe workspace, which has more default layout of palettes and toolbars and things. So I'm going to reopen the mixer. So I did that by using the mute voice 2, but I should also be able to do it by opening up the channel here, the tenor lead channel, to show the two sub channels and mute the lead sub channel. I think that's going to work, but only after I add some text. Let's find out. Right. So what's happening right now is that there are these two sub channels here. This is a good thing for people to know because it could be useful. There's two what are sub channels. It's the same thing that happens for violin, where we have the arco and pizzicato on separate sub channels, or trumpet, where the open and muted are separate sub channels, so you can set their sounds and volumes independently. The barbershop template is set up to do that with voice, two channels, so you can control the tenor, the volume for the tenor and the lead separately. For that matter, you could actually change their sounds. You could make the tenor be an oboe and the lead be a clarinet, or whatever you want. You can make them be different sounds. But in order for that to work, is you have to make the two different voices go into these two subchannels. So you've already got the music in two channels, right? I mean, in two voices. The tenor is voice 1, lead is voice 2. But now I need to get voice 1 to go into the first subchannel, the tenor subchannel, and I need voice 2 to go into the lead subchannel. Well, we don't need you to press special buttons to make that happen. We know that's complicated and there's no easy way to do it, so we invented one that's a decent workaround. You go to the text palette and you'll see these real special palette ones here: SA, TB, TL, and BB. What you're going to do is click that first note and add the TL. This is a special text element that knows how it's got settings. If I right click it and go to staff text properties, you'll see it's been set up so that voices 1 and 3 are going to the tenor channel. 2 and 4 are going to the lead channel. So simply by adding that text element to the beginning of your score, it will separate out those for you. And so now when I play this score, let me actually just go to the tenor part here. The tenor one is, now I've muted this staff. But what if I don't want it muted? Maybe I just want it quieter. So I can take this lead part and just make it quieter. Or I could turn the tenor part, instead of that choir sound, I could let it be trumpets. So that you can hear one part distinctively with the other ones different. So the barbershop, all the choir, all the choral templates are set up with that special thing where they have these sub channels for the different voices. But in order to take advantage of it, you have to use these special text elements from the palette, and that takes the voices and puts them into those sub channels. So TL does it for tenor lead, BB does it for baritone and bass, SA does it for soprano and alto, TB does it for tenor bass in a more typical choral setting. And you'll see they're made invisible so that you add it to the score to get the playback effect, but nothing happens. So Dallin, if you are not seeing, so Dallin, make sure, well, first of all, make sure you've got a recent version of MuseScore. I mean, these mute voice buttons have been here for maybe the last 2 or 3 years, but if you've got an older version of MuseScore, you might not see those. So make sure that your mixer, first of all, make sure you've got the current version, 3.6.2, and if not, update for sure. But also, notice this show hide details button here. It's possible you've collapsed that whole top section and you're only seeing the bottom section. So make sure you, if you're only seeing the bottom section of the mixer, then click this bar at the top there to expand the top section to show the details, and that should show you all the other settings, the place where you can set the sound, place where you can change MIDI stuff should you want to, and then have those mute voice buttons. So, all right. I feel like I've actually caught up here. I had a couple of questions that had nice, long, involved answers. Anyone got some nice, quick ones? Okay, here we go. Update a template. Okay, so yeah, I update templates pretty often. So, for instance, I feel like I just created a template that I want to update. So as part of my the course that the workshop I'm doing tomorrow, let me show you a score that I created for it. It's kind of a neat thing I'm doing is I've taken certain pieces, and like this is a Chopin Nocturne. So if you know that piece, or if you've heard much music in your life, you probably recognize, oh yeah, that's kind of how that piece goes. I took it and reduced it to a lead sheet, and I created a template for it in which so that I created several of these, and I customized the settings to make the chord symbols big but still not jazz font, because this isn't a jazz workshop. So okay, Dallin, great, glad you found that. And by the way, dark mode is something that was sort of a not well thought out addition at one point in MuseScore. For MuseScore 4, dark mode, they're actually considering making it the default. I don't think they will, but they're definitely putting a lot more effort into optimizing dark mode. So dark mode fans will hopefully be happier with MuseScore 4. All right, so this was created from a template. But if I want to update my template, like if I look at this and say, you know what, maybe those chord symbols are just a little big. So I'm going to collect a chord symbol, and what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to open the template itself. I'm not going to work from this score. So I'm going to use Control Open and go to where my scores are, go up a level, and then templates, which is where my templates are, right? That's where your template should be, up a level from scores. So it's this guy here, classical lead sheet. That's the template I created. So the template I created is that Nocturne. And we do that. We like making the template be an actual score so that there's a reasonable preview that you can see, so it doesn't just look blank and generic and empty, that you can really see what your score is going to look like. That was the theory here, but you can just have it be an empty score. But if I try to create a new score from this template now, I can go to my custom templates, classical lead sheet, and I can really kind of see a thumbnail of what the thing actually looks like. No, I can't tell that the chord symbols are big, but that's useful, especially for templates that involve, multiple instrument selection. You kind of see how they're grouped and so forth. So if I want my chord symbols to be maybe a little smaller, let me reopen my inspector, F8. And again, F8. So every once in a while I'm pressing F8 and I'm not getting anything to happen. Can't tell you why. But you saw it, right? I saw it say F8 there. I have a feeling my keyboard focus was somewhere else somehow. And sometimes the actual keyboard logger itself steals focus, which is annoying. So if I decide I'm going to click a chord symbol and I see it's currently set to 14-point font, what if I go down to just 12 and then set as style? Maybe I like that better. Maybe I think that's good enough. So I selected it and then I said set as style. Now, they all went down. It's funny because now it looks good. It doesn't look that much different to me, but it does look better. So I actually like this. So I opened my template, I modified it, and now I save it. That's it. So the template is now saved. If I create a new score from that template, I say custom templates, classical lead sheet, finish, and I enter a chord symbol, it's 12-point. However, that doesn't affect existing scores. My existing Nocturne is still 12-point. So if you want to update existing scores, depending on how many of them there are and how badly you want it, here's how I would do it. What I would do is I would then take that template, that classical lead sheet template, and go to Format, Save Style. And this saves to your Styles folder. So I'll call it Classical Lead Sheet. Now I can come back to my Nocturne and go to Format, Load Style, and pick Classical Lead Sheet. And there it is. Now did you see it happen? Happens too quick. There they were 14-point. When I redo that action, now they're 12-point. So by loading the style file associated with that template, then you can retroactively apply that template style settings to other scores should you want. I think I'm not actually going to do this. I don't know. I'll have to think about it, actually. But I think I'm going to undo those changes to my template and resave it. So dark mode, I will demonstrate that. A lot of programs, it's become a thing over the last couple of years for a lot of programs. A lot of systems are really pushing dark mode. Some people feel it's easier on the eyes. I'm not a dark mode fan personally, but I'll show you what it looks like. If you go to Edit, Preferences, and then Theme, Dark. When I hit OK, it's going to partially apply it. Then you get the idea. We are going to, for MuseScore 4, have the ability for the score itself to also be white on black, which to me is really freaky. I really don't do well with trying to read music white on black. But I do kind of like this version of dark mode because it does make your score stand out. The rest of the interface is then kind of falls into the background. You can really focus on the music more. But I use a workspace for that and just make the other stuff go away. So anyhow, that's what dark mode is. And I think if you close MuseScore and come back, it subtly changes a few things. What the heck? Let's find out. Discard my changes to things, discard changes. And I'm just going to reload it and see when it comes back if it looks any different. Because sometimes I think some of the settings don't fully apply until you restart it for stuff like that. But I think this looks the same. The palette's still white background. The score is still white background. Everything else looks pretty much the same. So I think it did fully apply. I guess the easy way to find out for sure is when I go back to light mode, do I notice anything weird? So far, everything looks the same. Let me go back to the preferences dialog, see if the dialog itself looks fine. So yeah, I think it actually works well now. I think for a while it didn't. By the way, I mentioned last week when I was customizing, showing you my customizations, how I size the inspector based on dynamics. I messed that up when I opened my mixer, because my mixer by default opens up right on top of the inspector, and then it widened the inspector. Yeah, I don't like that. So I'm going to go back to my editing workspace, and because that's the one I like to work in, and I'm going to go find my dynamics, add a dynamic marking to the score, and adjust the width until the scroll bar just disappears. So it's just wide enough to show all the settings for dynamics. Again, I'm not sure if that's literally the thing that's the widest, because different elements have different settings, and so they require the inspector to be different widths. But I find dynamics is the widest of anything I use regularly. So that's how I like to size my inspector. All right. Did I see? How did you get my not? How did I get my new composition and not have the music? Well, it never does. When you create a new score, Control N to create a new score, and then I select my template from Custom Templates, Classical Lead Sheet, it'll show in the thumbnail there. But then when you hit finish, it gives you an empty score. That's how templates always work. So if you create a new score and you select a template, then it's always blank. So make sure if you're creating a custom template, when you save it to your templates folder. So like that score that I created is not in my scores folder. It's here. It's in Documents, MuseScore 3 templates. If you want to create a template, that's where you save it, not to your scores folder, but your templates folder. Anything that you save to your templates folder will be there available when you create a new score under custom templates. And you see that I've created a lot of them, including one called delete that I haven't deleted yet. A lot of these templates I've created for special reasons that I really don't need anymore, and I could probably delete them, but whatever, they don't hurt to be there. So some of these I didn't create, other people created, like this Orff percussion, and the symphonic sounds is a particular sound font that's not general MIDI compliant, so it has its own template to set up all the association of things. So there you go. So I see now a question from, oh yeah, but just to finish what I was saying about symphonic sounds, Dave, if you're here, if you have a sound font that has, that's not general MIDI compliant, and therefore MuseScore has no idea what program change 0, program change 1, program change 2 is, etc. Well, what you can do is you can set up a score that has those associations for an orchestra or whatever else, and then save that as a template. Then when you create a new score from that template, it will have those associations. So, that template becomes your own personal standard. So people who use non-standard sound fonts will sometimes create templates to go with them to avoid avoid having to constantly choose instruments. Okay, so Petra's question is a MIDI imported thing. So again, it would be way better if I could look at your actual MIDI file. So if you go to the community, so I'm going to go to where the community is. I'm going to post the link. Here's the community conversation space. I'm going to post this into the chat, because the problem is every score is different. And so this is the place where you go to post scores that you want me to be able to look at, and it's also the place where you post scores for the masterclass and other things. So it's free. Just create an account if you haven't already, and then you can easily post your scores here. Because if you have your score posted here or your MIDI file posted here, then I can deal with your actual score instead of sort of a generic one. So the problem is that depending on what's going on rhythmically with your voices, there may or may not be, the way that you would have to try to fix that is going to differ. So I will say MIDI is like a last resort. If you have music you want to get into MuseScore and all you have is a MIDI file, I personally would generally rather just type it in. It's almost never going to be the case that the MIDI file is going to give you something reasonable, except for really simple music. But if the music's at all complicated, especially music for guitar or piano, where there's multiple notes happening at once and overlapping, there's almost no chance of success, because artificial intelligence just hasn't sorted that out. Artificial intelligence isn't good enough to know which hand played which note, which notes that you played almost at the same time are really a chord that you meant to play literally at the same time versus that you meant to arpeggiate. Or if you hold two notes and then take your finger off one a little before you took your finger off the other, does that require multiple voices? There's way too much subjective things for artificial intelligence to try to solve that. When you import a MIDI file, it's going to be questionable. So it's going to be tricky. But your question hopefully is a relatively easier one, in that if you have three voices that are really distinct. So I'm going to enter in voice 1, E. Hello. Okay, here we go. E, 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 and then I go back here, and voice 2, C, 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 and then go back, voice 3, G, 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 G. All right, I have three voices. If you want that to be three separate instruments, let's try this. I'm going to go ahead and press I for the instruments dialog, and I'll add a flute, a clarinet, and a bassoon. And I want, and they went above the piano because in orchestral music, that's the norm. That's fine. I'm going to cut this and paste it into the top staff. And what I'm going to try is explode. I think explode, if the very first thing it sees is multiple voices, will try to explode based on multiple voices. I didn't program it that way originally. I wrote the original explode code, but I think someone improved it later to do that. So let's find out. Explode. Boom. Well, there you go. So if it's three voices used consistently as such, brilliant. Explode does the trick. Or, let me undo that. Now I'm going to use implode on this, because now I've got three voices, but it could have all been just a chord. So I'm going to go to Tools, Implode, and now you see it's, a chord rather than three voices. If I then go back and try to explode, it's going to do the same thing it did before. It's going to split it up among the three parts. So if you have three separate voices, explode does it right. If you have chords of three notes, explode does it right. What you're going to have trouble with is cases where it's a mixture. So for instance, let me make a copy of this measure. I'll select it and press R, and then I'll implode the second measure. Tools, implode. And now I'm going to select both measures and try to explode. Tools, explode. So you'll see it got the first measure as you wanted, but it didn't work on the second measure. That's because it's an all or nothing thing with explode. If the first things it sees is multiple voices, it says, oh, you're trying to explode multiple voices, and does that everywhere. So it'll only work where there's multiple voices. If the first thing it sees is a chord, then it says, oh, you're working with chords. It'll explode that and ignore multiple voices. So it's not smart enough to go beat by beat and say, well, here it's a chord, here it's multiple voices. This gets really arbitrarily complex, difficult to sort out for humans as well, which is, again, an artificial intelligence thing. And no, we don't have that going on. But in this case, if you know you have multiple voices consistently, or you know you have chords consistently, explode will do the trick. So Dallin, you've added metadata. So you went to File, Score Properties, and added this information, the arrange. So I'll just put myself as Marc Sabatella as the arranger, but the composer was Chopin, and copyright is, I'll just say public domain. And I'll spell public domain right. So I've got this information in the metadata. Metadata is metadata, meaning it's information about a score. It's not actually part of the score. I mean, it's saved to the file, but the only part of it that you'll normally see by default is the copyright message. That shows up in the footer. That title information that you entered, that's for your own benefit, should you happen to want to look at that metadata. There is no way to get that metadata into the title frame. So if I say add text title, I can type a title, but there's nothing I can put into this title frame that will read the metadata. Now, you would think that would be a logical thing to add, and yeah, I agree. It would be a logical thing for us to add someday. So far, no one has volunteered to implement that. So far, there's no way to get that metadata into the frame. What you can do is get metadata into headers and footers. And so I do want to show that in case that's something someone's interested in. So format, style, let's go to the header. And I'll say, yes, I want to see it on the first page. I don't want it different on odd and even pages. And I'll say that right in the middle. No, I'll say I want it on the left, that I want the title. So there is a special thing. And when you kind of hover just right, you see that yellow thing show up. And good luck getting it to stay. But if you position just right, it stays. And now you can look at it and see where the... you can also just go to the handbook to find that, because that's way better than trying to hover just magically so. Yeah, this was not well designed. All right, I'm going to guess it's something like $T. I don't see title in that top thing there, so I think it's going to be this $: title. So I'm just going to guess $: title : and see if that does the trick. Apparently not. So let's go back. So if anyone has any good tricks for getting that information to show longer, I think it's work title. Movement title. I see work title. That's what it is. It's called work title, as opposed to movement title. So work title. So I've said I want it on the first page. I've said I want it on the left, and I've said $: work title : That should be it. I should be seeing it, and I'm not seeing it. So obviously I've done something wrong, like maybe I entered it into the wrong field. Score properties, arranger. Oh, I didn't put in work title. There you go. Title of song. Boom, there it is. So you can make the metadata show up in the header or in the footer, but not in that big old title frame. That's just the way it is. Not great, but someday it'll happen. All right. Bug fix for page. Oh yeah, so page numbers. That's a good thing. So yeah, there was one of these sort of unfortunate design decision things that wasn't as well thought as it could be. The header here, and that includes the page number as well as that title, was never. Let me go to View and turn on Show Page Margins. So this line here is showing you the margin, and MuseScore knows not to put anything outside that line, but it doesn't know to avoid the header. The header is kind of within the printable area. So if I try to put a note, let me go to concert pitch mode to get rid of that key signature. Watch what happens if I push this note up higher and higher. It's going to crash right into that header, right? Now, as soon as it hits the margin, now MuseScore adds space, right? Because it knows notes can't go into the margin. But it doesn't understand that header is probably something to be avoided. Here again, I think they've done something for MuseScore 4 to fix that for real. But the easy way of dealing with this for now is let's get this header into the margin area instead of the printable area. So I'm going to go to the text. I forget what happens if I right-click this. If I right-click this style, I think it just takes me to this dialog. I really want it to be, this dialog is about setting up the header, not positioning it. To position it, I'm going to go to the text style. So it's basically format, style, and then text styles at the bottom of that list. And I got to make this wider so I can read all this. Text styles at the bottom of the list, and then I find header. So right now, you'll see the offset is 0 millimeters. That means it is 0 millimeters. The top of the text is 0 millimeters from the margin. I want to go higher. That's negative numbers. So I'm going to go like negative, I think 3 millimeters or 4 or 5 millimeters. Oops, that's the X. That's the X offset. I don't want the X offset. I want the Y offset. So I'm hitting the down arrow here to go negative. Yeah, 3 millimeters gets that header into the margin. And now that it's in the margin, the note no longer is colliding with it, right? Now, well, did I go far enough? No, because the G is hanging below. So let me go back to format, style, and instead of only 3 millimeters, let's say 3.5 millimeters. It still kind of touches. Let's call it 4 millimeters. So there you go. 4 millimeters moves your header into there. Now, is there something else, some sort of, character with accents below the thing, some of those like Brazilian consonants and things I know that do weird things like that? Yes, maybe you need to go a little more than 4 millimeters to be safe. What the heck, let's go with 5. So negative 5 millimeters as your Y offset for the header text style is what gets your header into the margin so it won't crash into things. And so that applies to the page number, and it applies to anything else you have in your header. So so whether it's the page number, because this text style is for the whole header. So the whole header moved together. Let me see if I can make that any more clear here. Let's go back to the style dialog. And you'll see now, as I change that Y set, they're moving together. As the header, as the title's moving down there, so is the page number there. And then as I move to negative territory, they both move together. That whole thing is the header. So the header text style affects everything that's in the header. And again, the header is the thing that I defined up here. By default, it had a page number, but I defined it to also have the work title. Okay, verse. So choral music with verses. That's if you're happy with the defaults, it's easy. If you're not, then it's hard. So here's some notes, and let me add some. So I'll Control L. I'm just going to type 1, period, and then my thing. So I'm going to say, how are you now? And then I'll go down to verse 2 and say 2, period. I'm fine, thank you. These aren't very good lyrics. And then I'll go down to verse 3 and say 3. What about you? So yesterday I was directing. I was directing an ensemble kind of teaching, and I was talking about phrasing, and I was singing the song "Here's That Rainy Day," which goes, maybe I should have saved those left, or something like that. Over dreams. That's not quite the right pitches, but and I said that's not natural. You should sing it more like the words go, and but But it doesn't matter if you actually know the words or not. It could be any words. It could be so if you were saying maybe I should have saved those leftover dreams, that would make sense. But it could just as easily have been I went to the store and bought me some eggs. Could be that, right? So it doesn't really matter what your lyrics are. That's just a little random aside. So what MuseScore has done here is it's chosen to align the lyric, the start of the lyric with the note, and then put the verse number off to the right. In fact, it does that even if this is like you got 13 verses, still the beginning of the lyric aligns with the note, verse number hanging off to the left. So that's what it does by default. And if you're okay with that, or if you're even at all debating whether you're okay with that, I recommend you go with it because it's way easier than anything else because it just happens by default and it doesn't look too bad, and at least some publishers do that. It's bothering me that I'm not singing that melody right, so I'm going to jump into masterclass mode and think about this. Maybe that's scale degree 5, maybe, and then the next note was F. It was a scale degree flat 7. Maybe I should have saved those leftover dreams. That's how the melody goes. I had a pitch a little off there and it was bothering me, so I had to think through it. So anyone else who knows that song and was bothered also, hopefully you're less bothered now. Okay, so if what you want instead, like normally one syllable words should be centered under. It's an okay cheat, but it's cheating. The other thing that you sometimes see people do is actually left align it, but then align the center the lyrics, but then get the verse numbers to left align somehow. So, whoops, screen went black. Screen went black. All right. Screen black being fixed now. And I'll deal with this, and then I think I will wrap up because it's about that time. And I have to finish preparing my workshop. It's going to be awesome. Okay, so hopefully I'm back now. Okay. So, yes, just by typing, and by the way, I didn't put a space in there, and as you may know if you deal with lyrics a lot, control space is how you would embed a space within the lyric. Because if you just hit a space bar, of course, it moves you to the next syllable. So if you want a space between your period and your lyric, which I recommend, control space will do it. Control space. So this looks pretty good to me, and I wouldn't mess with it. But just for the sake of argument, let's try to get the other style to happen. So I'm going to eliminate. And MuseScore knows to do this because it sees a number and a period. I think actually it just looks for punctuation. It sees a number and a punctuation character because it'll also work with like a parenthesis. One right parenthesis will do the same thing. So I'm going to eliminate those because I'm curious how I would do this. See if we can find this together. So this does the trick. Now what I need is to get these are now centered, right? So now I want the numbers to be off to the side here. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this, to be honest. I'm thinking. One thing I could try to do is add staff text and position it, but that sounds fiddly. I want to trick MuseScore into doing the work for me. So here's what I want, is I'm going to add a second set of lyrics here. And I guess to do that, I don't think I can add, if I hit Control L now, it's going to put this in another voice. I don't think I can have two lyrics in the same verse, other than with a second voice. So I'm going to use a second voice. I'm going to go to voice 2 and enter a rest. And yes, I can make it invisible, and I can make the other rests in that voice invisible because I don't really need them. But now I'm going to attach my things to that, and I'll say 1, period. And then verse 2 is 2, period. Verse 3 is 3, period. And now I'm going to use the inspector to set the alignment to be right aligned So now that period aligns with that stem. And then I'm just going to move it as far as I need to the right. So negative X offset. That did it. And now I'll do the same for the 2. So just like when I tried to select the frame underneath the text, I used Control to get it. If I just click this, it thinks I want I'm. It doesn't want me to get the 2. So I'll just Control click now, and now I got the 2. And I can move it 2 spaces. Oh, right align, and 2 clicks backwards. And then same thing here. Click, and then click again to get underneath it. And then right align, and 2 clicks to the right. That wasn't too bad, was it? So I would consider doing that. Certainly if I was trying to do this for any professional publication that demanded this, that's how I would do it. For my own purposes, though, I'm no one's going to complain if I hand them what MuseScore does by default, other than an actual publisher. So, but there you go. There's probably other ways of doing this, but this works, and so that's what I would try. There you go. Anyhow, once again, I want to remind everyone about my workshop. So I will I pinned it to the top, right? So the pin to the top is the information about my harmony workshop. And I'm just going to say another word or two about it. What I'm going to be talking about is how to create chord progressions. And in particular, I will be using things like this nocturne to talk about the fact that there's secondary dominant and then a diminished chord, both used to approach that D minor. Here's a secondary dominant approaching that, diminished chord approaching this, and here's my all-time favorite, minor 4 going to 1, right? I'm going to show this being used in a variety of songs, not just this one, but we'll look at other classical music, we'll look at jazz, we'll look at pop music, and show how they're using these same devices. And that's it in a nutshell. You just got an hour workshop in like 20 seconds right there. Secondary dominance, diminished approach chords, and borrowed chords, which is what that minor 4 chord is. I'm just going to show you really how you can go about really applying those to create chord progressions. And I got it kind of boiled down into about an hour. So definitely come join if you can live, because then you can be in the chat. But if not, definitely just go to the site and click the register button. You'll be notified about where you can access the replay video. Because I'd love that if people would check out the workshop and learn a few things about harmony. Even if you've taken the harmony course, I think you'll find it a useful refresher and maybe a slightly different twist on the information. So that's the commercial there. And I now am going to work on getting that together. So let's play out here. I want to thank everyone for being here for the MuseScore Café today. This has been Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore. This is my regular weekly series, and first Wednesday of the month is always these Ask Me Anything sessions. Second session is I pick some topics, so by all means, if people have ideas for topics, shoot them to me also by going to the community and going to that conversation space and give me some ideas for topics. And then the third week is when I do a particular score. I just focus on one score, whether it's me entering it or critiquing someone else's. So that's something else that we have to look forward to a little later this month. So, hope everyone has a good day, good week, and hope to be seeing some of your comments in the chat tomorrow.